You are listening to Fantha Tracks.
Because of the following special program, Wonder Woman and the Incredible Hulk will not be presented this evening.
It's time to get all your Star Wars news in a single file.
That doesn't sound too hard.
Boom! This is Making Tracks.
This is the way.
Here are your hosts, Mark Newbold and Mark Mulcaster.
I know these people. They are brutal. Does this look Jedi to you?
That's not how the Force works.
They'll never see it coming.
Count me in.
You're listening to Making Tracks. This is episode 232. I'm your co-host, Mark Newbold, and joining me today is a man who is a little bit older than he was before, but not as old as he's going to be. It's Mark Mulcaster. Mark, how you doing, man?
Very well. I'm good, man.
I'm happy. I'm happy that you're very well. We have a bulging listener's bag.
Bulging sack.
Stuffed to the brim with wonderful things. Normally, we would do the whole preamble, but we have so many questions, and thank you, listeners, for sending them in, that I thought it was wise that we just pile straight into it and get stuck in with these questions. So, without any further ado, I shall ask the first question. It is from Mike Jarvis, and the question is, having read the Marvel comics and Brian Daly books as a kid in the 70s, I'd like to see an adventure of Han and Chewie, a series, live action or animated. What do you guys think? So, Han and Chewie, live action, animated. Mike Jarvis wants to see it. Would you concur?
I absolutely would. Yeah. Do you know what? Kind of back referencing our conversation in episode 231, where we talked about 20 years of Dave Filoni and animation, and we talked about maybe Resistance wasn't necessarily the right kind of tone, but I kind of think actually you could do a Han and Chewie adventure that is maybe a little bit more kind of zany. You know, I'm thinking a little bit kind of like Droids was back in 86 when we had the poor man Stash Rendar, who was a poor man's Han Solo, and obviously talking about Mungo Bayabab. So I think so. I mean, the bantery, bickery kind of ness between the two, and the fact that's, and especially something that they really play on in Force Awakens, is this kind of notion that actually Han is a bit of a putz. A few times Chewie's just like, what are you going on about? What about you?
I agree. In terms of animation, I think that would be brilliant. I'd love to see animation carry on with things that we kind of have seen before. So pick up on things that maybe didn't get carried forward in live action or carried forward on the big screen. So I think there's definitely scope for that there. Han and Chewie series would be brilliant because it is that sort of sequential action adventure sort of story of the week thing, which the comics used to do so well back in the day. And Brian Daly did brilliantly in the Solo trilogy. So I'd be happy with that. And AC Crispin, obviously, later on with her trilogy. So I think that'd be fantastic. There's enough of a world around Han Solo that you could do it. And as you just said, you could make it a bit madcap and wacky. And I think that would fit. Definitely got some options there. In terms of where they do it, I'd like animation. I kind of think Disney Plus with the live action should probably just focus on the Mandoverse. Make live action Star Wars, Mandoverse stuff, animated Star Wars, everything else and anything it wants to be. Tell you big epic adventures on the big screen. It's probably what Marvel should do, and it probably is what they try to do. Put the big epic stuff on the big screen. Sometimes they put things on the big screen you think might would work better on Disney Plus, vice versa. But here we go. We've got Mando and Grogu, a spin-off from the live-action series. Let's see how that all shakes down and what kind of vibe we get from that. But to answer Mike's question, I would love to see Han and Chewie adventures because it's exactly like you say. Han was his own best spokesperson. I'm the best pilot. I'm the best smuggler. I got the fastest ship. Chewie's the heart and Chewie's the logic. He's the one that keeps that, the wheels on the tracks. So to see them navigate the galaxy, like you say, clutching their way through at times, and actually quite skillfully and quite brilliantly in others, I think it would be great fun.
Can't agree more. Okay, so on to second question. So this is from Mr. Richard Hutchinson, and he asks, what will be the lasting legacy of the High Republic?
It's a great question, Rich, and a bit of a killer. I think a few things. The lasting legacy is everyone's going to need an extra bookcase to hold everything on it. That's one thing for sure. There's an awful lot of content came out over those, 4 years? So if you're into the High Republic and you really got into it and you followed it and really went down every avenue, what a rich, fantastic avenue for storytelling. Legacy-wise, back in the EU when you had things like New Jedi Order, big publishing initiatives that told so many stories. And while Dark Horse maybe didn't monopolise on that as much as they might have done, and there were other things that didn't fill in the gaps, High Republic's done a great job, because now more than ever you've got mature readers, young readers, comics, manga, animated series, with the Acolyte, a live action series. They've really gone to town on the High Republic. So in terms of doing kind of what they did with Shadows of the Empire, everything but the film, I'd like to think that there will be other initiatives like the High Republic. It's tricky to do them in anywhere other than an era that's not been touched. Yeah. And the great thing about the High Republic was that it stepped a century pretty much before the Phantom Menace, and really did fill out a huge chunk of time that really, even if you look back at Timeline Gold and all the old sort of tracking the chronology, nobody really touched much of anything in that era. So it was a very wise thing to do. I don't know whether there's other eras in between the High Republic and the start of the prequel trilogy that you could or would want to drop into. Maybe not. Maybe that's for a period after The Rise of Skywalker, but it feels like Starfighter and the Rey trilogy is going to sit in that era. And they don't seem to like filling in the gaps too much. We're not going to get anything in and around the Mandoverse, because that's definitely a Filoni and Favreau thing. So there's time periods in there, but I think if you did anything like the High Republic, you'd have to step it quite a bit further forward. But the legacy is probably that it can be done, that you can take an era and you can fill it out and you can seed it into later eras of Star Wars and make it feel like it was always there. So I would say probably the skill of the writers and the Project Luminous team to really seed it and bed it into the era was actually quite brilliantly done. So I would say that's the legacy, to make other future Luminous teams go, well, they did it so well with the High Republic, we can do it with Project whatever we call it.
I think it's a fair enough answer, to be fair, mate. Yeah, like the obvious comparison is to, say, like New Jedi Order, which was, 23 books, and High Republic is, 14 books, I think. So it's shorter, or there's fewer books, I should say, in the book count. But like you said, it spans so much more, because, I'm just talking about actual books from my bookshelf. And then the comics and that, because Dark Horse kind of left, and I don't know if that was an intentional thing, they kind of left New Jedi Order alone until really they basically just skipped it, went over to Legacy, didn't they, beyond that?
Yeah.
But the difference is with New Jedi Order was that it was a publishing initiative with the existing characters that we basically all knew. Yes, they introduced new characters, but it was about Luke, Leia, Han, Jason, Jaina, and Ben. The brazenness and the ballsiness of this has been that they've gone, do you know what? We're other than maybe mentioning Yoda and what have you, and a few bits and bobs, new era, new characters. So therefore, it means that they can kind of craft who they want to. And I suppose it's probably a little bit too early to really necessarily pinpoint exactly what the legacy is, because I think legacy will come when they reuse characters. Now, they obviously reuse Vanessa Rowe in The Acolyte, which is kind of like, I guess, loosely connected to the High Republic in respects of it's at the end of that era, meant to bridge the High Republic era into the prequel era. So I don't necessarily think we're going to put too much more there. I mean, you might be able to get another Acolyte type show in there or something if you wanted to. But yeah, I think it'll be what people remember and which characters may resurface in different storytelling. The problem with it being so further down the timeline from everything else is that then it makes it very difficult to be able to port your characters from the High Republic really into, say, a Mandoverse era or an OT era, because it's 100 plus years or so. So therefore, some will be around, not all of them will be. I mean, the question also is how well did it sell? How well was the fandom engaged by it generally? And that's always a difficult thing with publishing programs, is because obviously you are limiting your reach by the fact that not everybody wants to read or likes reading or has the time to read. And then also when you look at these big publishing programs, you can oh my God, there's 14 books or 15 books. But then if you break it down and you go, right, actually, you don't necessarily need to read the very, very young reader books. So you can skip maybe those 4, 5 or 6 books, and then you can kind of go, right, okay, so that's 9 books. So it makes it easier. But I guess we'll see. We'll see what happens in phase more, as I think they've been referring to it in some of the panels and stuff. So it is definitely taking up a lot of my bookshelves, I have to say. But there's some fantastically written stories in there. So if you haven't dipped into the High Republic, I think people should. I'm thoroughly endorsing that is something for people to check out.
Hi, this is Maria Sandoval, head hairstylist for the Star Wars universe, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks.
Next question from Jamie Richards, Tops artist Jamie Richards. Would reinserting the Tosche Station deleted scenes improve the flow of A New Hope? What do you think?
No.
I love your succinct answers.
Jamie Richards, tops artist and also a top artist and a top bloke. When we talked about re-releasing a 50th anniversary of Star Wars, and you kind of go, right, let's put everything in, put it all in. That's the only way to tell, really, isn't it? And I don't know if maybe somebody's kind of like edited those scenes into like a New Hope. Sometimes you kind of go, well, have they taken it out for a reason? And I know because of how things were back then, it's different in the digital era because runtime equals literal physical amount of film footage and stuff. It then has a actual intrinsic cost onto the actual production of the film. How many reels do you need to split that over for your 700,000 or, however many cinemas it's going to? So there's that. But also it came down to an editorial change. It's a timing thing. It's like actually when we kind of look at it, we take a step back. I think my only real kind of argument for not actually putting the Jabba scene in is that actually, is it offering us any information that we don't know, any information that we need to move the story on? It kind of hangs there for quite a while. Although, like with a Toshi kind of scene, you kind of, I guess what it does is it kind of creates a different character of Luke. Luke kind of becomes slightly more sympathetic because he's the kind of the outsider and the loner and the one who gets picked on by his quote unquote friends. What you get from Luke from the film is the impetus. He wants to escape. He's like impatient and he wants to move on. So it's kind of different. Obviously, it then ties a lot greater into the reunion with Biggs, because that kind of doesn't really make a huge amount of sense to anybody who hasn't got good listening and picks up on that one comment that he makes around the table, the dinner table.
Yeah.
So there's an emotional impact in that sense that it would kind of bring that all back. I think it could just make it a bit bloaty. And I think if Paul Hirsch says, no disrespect to Garrick and Mark and everybody, the acting wasn't particularly great. It was windy. There's issues with like continuity with the capes and stuff like that because it was blowing all over the place. So it might be one of those things that it kind of just breaks things a little bit. Final point of this is that if you think about it, it takes an hour to get us to the Death Star. Like the second hour, we rescued a princess, we've escaped, and we've blown up a Death Star. It's a film of two halves when you think about it.
Yeah, that's true because it's 45 minutes till we meet Han Solo. And so, it is very much front loaded in terms of the Tatooine stuff. When they do the re-release, you're not going to bring that many more new people to Star Wars via a Star Wars 50th anniversary re-release.
No, I don't think so, no.
So I think if they wanted to add that scene in and other scenes, now's the time to do it for a special 50th anniversary release because, and it is the anchor stone of all Star Wars in terms of films, you could introduce those scenes. It would undoubtedly alter the flow. Things that you just mentioned, like continuity, color correction, audio, all things they could work on, certainly in 2025. Totally. If the cape's flowing that way and they want it flowing that way, ILM can do that. So there's things they can work around. So that's not really a concern. And they could make it all look like it fits if they want to, the guy's still around. If they want to get John Williams to rescore some music to make the edits work, he could certainly go back to his original scores and make adjustments there. If you want to use the Jabba scene, which again, I agree with you, I think it's completely redundant. But if they wanted to throw everything in with the kitchen sink, give us a really great looking Jabba for 2027 and make that work. And now cropping Han Solo out and having him step over his tail, there's ways of
call it special edition. It's just call it 20th anniversary, which has been remastered, cleaned up and stuff. And maybe they'd redone the effects, but hadn't added anything back in. I don't think the world, and I don't think Star Wars in itself would be any different or be any lacking because of it.
I don't know, because you think back to then, we knew we were getting the prequels. Lucas had made it known that in 94 he was writing them, and we knew that was coming. And I think the Pepsi deal was in place for the special editions.
Yeah.
But anything back then, StarWars.com had just started, Insider was really on a roll. And so any little tiny thing, you think how much we poured over the Coruscant scenes at the end of Jedi. So any little addition, any little tweak, I think.
That stuff, or even like the Mos Eisley. But I mean, even redoing the effects, like when we saw it, some of those Battle of Yavin shots, totally right, definitely needs it. But then it comes down to like a question of taste. What do me and you prefer as Star Wars fans versus the guy who actually ponied up the cash to do it and then actually wrote the stuff to begin with? Think about like what StarWars.com would have been like if you didn't have all those like behind the Dewback or whatever it was.
Anatomy of a Dewback,
that's Anatomy of a Dewback. That's fascinating and still today one of the most interesting documentaries I think of that era.
Absolutely.
Oh, this is quite a long one from Mark Rolfe. Disney have gone all out with anniversaries in the last 10 years, but we've heard nothing about the Force Awakens 10th year anniversary. What content would you like to see in December? I'm desperate for a more expanded cut and all those deleted scenes. Imagine seeing that cut with a lightsaber falling from space after the scroll. How would you like Lucasfilm to celebrate The Force Awakens? Because it's so far this year, and we are in the 8th month of the year. Not a lot.
Not a lot at all. I mean, we've had the celebration of Sith 20, which was great. And obviously Celebration touched on a lot of these things. So that was brilliant. And that feels more relevant, really, because we've now got Hayden back filming Ahsoka and making it very clear he'd like to do more. He's come out and said he'd like to do a Darth Vader series. So Hayden being back and Sith 20th feels very much of a thing. And they're smart to put a hook on that. Force Awakens' 10th anniversary in December feels like we've barely even considered it. And that is a huge milestone because that is by far, in pure numbers, the biggest grossing Star Wars film.
Yeah.
A New Hope has got 40 years on that film in terms of time and distance and such. Force Awakens in numbers is the highest grossing movie ever in North America, nearly did $1 billion. Globally, 2.1 billion or whatever it was. Crazy numbers. Point being, yes, they've not mentioned anything. We keep waiting for news on the Rey film. That would be a great hook. We know Starfighter's coming. It's after Force Awakens, obviously after the trilogy, but we don't know if there's any hooks to that. So when you think back to when Force Awakens came out and the massive deal that, for example, BB-8 was, and he's the face of the 10th anniversary logo, by the way. BB-8 was a huge deal. He was everywhere. The zeitgeist grabber that Grogu became 5 or 6 years later. Just the massive hullabaloo about Star Wars being back. We were doing premieres. BBC and all the other networks seemed to want to talk about it. Everything got a massive bump from The Force Awakens. So it seems to me that all that's happened is not that we're not going to celebrate The Force Awakens, it's that we just haven't heard about it. What would I like to see? Mark refers to that opening sequence with the hand, Luke's severed hand and the lightsaber and all of that stuff. We've since found out that it was a rumour for years and years and years, and one that never really got much sort of substance behind it. And then it turns out it was actually true. It really was something they were considering, and there's storyboards out there and other elements that makes you think, wow, we could have seen this as an opening scene. I'm kind of glad we didn't. It doesn't really work for me as a concept. It sounds kind of cool.
It sounds a bit clunky, doesn't it?
McClunky. I'm curious. I'd like to see it realised, but I'm kind of glad they didn't go down that route. Now, there are scenes in the film where it's Maz giving the lightsaber to Leia, and there's just little things, tweaks and changes there. I'd be curious to see those, but I wouldn't want to see those added into The Force Awakens in the way that I would like to see, for example, Tosche Station and other elements of the original Star Wars dropped into A New Hope re-release for the 50th. Because I don't think you compare Force Awakens 10th to A New Hope 50th. They're light years apart. But I do hope it gets its flowers, Force Awakens, because it reinvigorated and it was such a big deal. And it launched this new era, even though Rebels was already out, it kind of launched this new era so massively. To not celebrate 10 years of The Force Awakens would be crazy. Quite what we get, I don't know, because we've not got another celebration until 27. We've got a premiere coming up next year, but that's for Mando and Grogu. That's its own thing. So unless they're planning something really special, and I don't know what that is, I don't quite know. I would imagine there'll be a re-release and maybe charity screenings and hopefully some of the cast. But how they do it, I don't know. What do you think?
So, as you mentioned, we got the BB-8 10th anniversary logo, which is on the publishing. So Lucasfilm released it on the publishing panel, didn't they? So that's on the comics and some other stuff.
I think it'll be on some of the insider re-releases. There's a Force Awakens.
Yeah, there's like an omnibus
collection
or something. Yeah. And this is more of a question actually for you. Have we ever really celebrated the 10th anniversary of Star Wars releases? Because 20 years seems like normally is the first one, or 25 tends to be the first kind of big anniversary, seems to get a lot of push and substance to it. I can't recall much, I mean, unless I'm completely blanking.
No, you're not. I think the only thing I can really put my finger on, Star Wars the first 10 years was a big program back in 87.
Yeah.
But also in 87, weirdly, Bantha Tracks finished. We had Star Tours launch. We had West End Games. But that really, if you look at it, was the start of the dark times, as people refer to it. So it was a weird time. So you did have that first 10 years. You had the 10th anniversary convention, the Starlog convention.
The Starlog one, yeah.
Where Lucas and Roddenberry met. So there was that. But other than that, no, it's a great point. There was no Revenge of the Sith 10th because everyone was so hyped for The Force Awakens, and we had the publishing program leading up and all the stuff that we were sort of getting excited for. So there wasn't really a focus on that. There wasn't, to my recollection, much of a 10th anniversary for Attack of the Clones. Yeah. So I think you're right, actually thinking back to it, Phantom Menace in 2009, there wasn't a massive thing for that I remember. So you raise a good point. There probably hasn't, outside of the original, and that celebrated the trilogy, the 10th anniversary stuff was celebrating all three. We've said this before. Every year now, you'll go, it's a 5, 10, 20, 25, 30. We can go on and on. Where does it stop?
20 years from Revenge of the Sith. That feels like a bit of a milestone. That's a long old time. 10 years, yeah. I mean, it kind of feels like a blink of an eye. But also then, I guess, these films now are made in a different way by different people. I wonder how much these kind of anniversaries really factor in onto conversations in Disney. I don't think I've seen any anniversaries for any Marvel films, for example.
No, I think it's probably more from the marketing side these days. I mean, everything's marketing, but
it's totally right. Yeah.
If you still had Star Wars weekends, I think they would, like at the Potter Tour in Watford, they will have, now they're celebrating Goblet of Fire, I think. So they'll make a big deal at the Potter Tour about, this is the focus, Goblet of Fire is the focus. It's 20 years since that. But Star Wars, because Galaxy's Edge is still...
It's in the universe, isn't it?
Yeah,
still,
exactly.
Yeah,
it's not the same. And like when we had Galaxies, for example, they would do celebrations on Galaxies, wouldn't they, of certain things. But there isn't even a virtual real estate like that in Star Wars. And also because we now don't have a Star Wars show, really. That's gone the by. You've still got Insider. To have a location or an outlet to celebrate these things and bring people in to congregate and discuss them, it's not quite the same. I think it's kind of left to people like us. It's left to the fandom to do it, really.
I was going to say, that's it. It's kind of left to Fanfatrax, really. So,
I didn't just mean Fanfatrax, but we'll take it.
But no, I mean, you make a good point. There's potentially opportunities there in merchandising. I mean, even like Disney Store, but then like you look at Disney Store at the moment, there's just not a lot of Star Wars stuff in the Disney stores. So Galaxy's Edge, well, maybe you could set of pins or something like that. So let's see what happens in 10 years' time. Mark, ask you a question again in 10 years' time and see if we're still scratching our heads about the 20th anniversary of Force Awakens.
For everything in one location, daily news, reviews, interviews, podcasts, video, and social media feeds, bookmark Fantatrax.com for Star Wars news 24/7, 365.
We have our next question. It's from another Mark, a regular question asker, Mark Spriggs. With limited news on live-action series, where do you think we could be going post-Ahsoka Season 2? We know we're getting Ahsoka Season 2 next year. There's no more live-action Star Wars being announced. We've got Maul, Shadow Lord, as we know. We can probably assume that we'll get another season of Tales of. We could quite possibly get more Lego Star Wars, which seems logical and very much welcome because people do enjoy that. But live-action, it does feel like it's reached a point where maybe hedging their bets because we know we've got Mando and Grogu and then we hit a totally new era with Starfighter. So maybe it's a let's wait and see. Do you think the reticence to announce or to push forward in live action is a budgetary thing? Do you think it's a focus group thing where maybe there's not the excitement for Star Wars at the moment that they would want to invest that kind of money? Do you think it's a change of focus? That now cinema is coming back into the Star Wars realm for the first time in 7 years, that maybe that's where the live action should go? If it's not that, what do you think they will do next?
So I think it could be that. I think they're possibly looking at it kind of going, right, now where do we actually put Star Wars? So it's a developmental thing. Just about every man and his dog seems to be attached to a Star Wars production at the moment or is in development. It might just be one of these Cold War races where like it's just a case of like whoever gets their script ready and approved, gets greenlit, and they put it in front of the cameras. I just don't know. Kind of feel like we're on a precipice. If Mando and Grogu does 1 billion, then we'll get another Mando and Grogu. If Starfighter does 850, then we'll get, if not another Starfighter-esque thing. But I think it's fairly clear with the franchises, for the most part, live action streaming hasn't been like A, the cash cow, and B, the popularity cow that I think they were expecting it to be. So maybe there might be this delineation again where it's like, okay, live action is for the big screen in cinemas, and then like animated, which is more cost effective, is great for Disney Plus because it's content.
I don't disagree with any of that. Where are we now? We've got, as I say, Mando and Grogu, Starfighter. The Taika Waititi film is still being mentioned out there. The James Mangold film is still being worked on, as we understand. There is the Kinberg trilogy, which may or may not be the Rey trilogy, that keeps being sort of bobbles up here and there. And I'm sure there's other things that could or could not happen. I don't think the X-Wing Rogue Squadron series is completely dead. So there are other things that could or may work or could or may happen. But right now, all seem focused on the big screen. Now, of those projects, you look at them and you think, wow, that Dawn of the Jedi would make quite a decent special event, like one-off series on Disney Plus. Certainly, X-Wing Rogue Squadron is absolutely to its bones made to be a TV series. I see no reason for that to be on the big screen. That's a TV show. So if you were going to think of a project to move into the slot for the next live action show, to me, Rogue Squadron feels purpose-built for television.
That's your gateway, isn't it? That's your live action show that becomes another one, Mando and Grogu. Because I don't necessarily ever think that they were thinking about sticking Mando and Grogu on the big screen. When we put season 1 out, or even season 2, I don't think they were thinking about it whatsoever.
Hi, my name is Amy Sang, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks.
Okay, so this is from John1. What could have saved the Acolyte?
So what could have saved the Acolyte? I think a fresh pair of eyes looking at the editing choices. I think, okay, we were at Joy Builders and the Acolyte came up more than once, and not in a negative way, in very much a missed opportunity way. And I agree, actually. I think people thought that the current was fine and interesting, and the characters were engaging, and there was a story to tell. But the flashbacks in episodes from memory 2 and 7, taking us completely out of the moment and throwing us back X amount of years, was too jarring a jump for it to really work as a smooth flow. And whilst most shows, I think, could probably do with another run over at the script and a bit of a tightening and a polish, and I think the Acolyte would have benefited from that. But I also think a few other shows would have benefited from that as well. Book of Boba Fett, Ahsoka maybe, just to tighten things up a touch. But they still worked. But at Acolyte, going back so much, those 2 times and just taking us completely out of the moment, was dramatic and very well done. I think they would have worked better as... I get with that Book of Boba Fett, the framing device was Boba being in the Bacta tank. So he's dreaming and we see the things he's thinking back to. And that's a neat little device.
That was a nice device, yeah.
And they probably didn't want to go back to the well on that one for Acolyte. But actually, I think in retrospect, maybe if they'd have thought of some convention to show us those moments from the past, 10 minutes here, 15 minutes there, and working that into the narrative of the modern, up-to-date, right now, as we sat, moments or episodes, I think that would have worked better. Now, that's not to say that would have saved the Acolyte at all, because we had a season and we had what looks like a Hail Mary at the end of let's throw Yoda in, let's throw Plagueis in. But Plagueis was done by ILM. That's no Hail Mary. That scene didn't happen as a last minute, let's throw that out and see what the fans think. I think maybe the Yoda one was, because that was a puppet on set. So maybe that was let's just chuck it in there, and if they're happy with it, let's go with it. And if they say no, you're not doing that, then we take it out, and it's no big loss, no harm, no foul. So maybe that was more of a Hail Mary, waggle the air quotes, to try and grab attention for season 2. But ultimately, they'd kind of cancelled it before the last episode even came out. They were very quick to say this show's not coming back.
I mean, that in itself begs the question: was that decision even made before it aired? Which begs the question of whether people in Lucasfilm or Disney or something kind of going, not too sure about how this is all going to resonate. Now, let's be fair. I think part of the Acolyte was unfairly maligned by toxic fandom. That's, I think we can say that. That's fair. There were some interesting things that I think they could have done. The whole kind of thing with like Kalnaka going a bit crazy. I think they could have done something a bit more of that. It kind of felt like it needed to be more of a mystery than there was. When you kill off Carrie-Anne Moss kind of in the first episode, I would have thought more star power, as it were, to keep her character, because she seemed pretty cool anyway from what we saw. I mean, I really like Night, and everybody just gets slaughtered. The world building I thought was pretty good, just overall. I mean, it didn't look cheap because it wasn't cheap. Maybe that's one reason why it got canned so quickly, was because I think maybe they weren't getting the kind of return that they were maybe expecting on social media and stuff like that. So it could have done with another pass, needed to be a little bit more dynamic. I think some of the directing, as in like the actors' direction, was a little bit weak. Some of it was great, but not all of it. Maybe there was just too many characters, and so you didn't really spend... and that's actually one thing I feel a little bit like the sequel trilogy. There's too many characters. Some of them are half-baked, and you don't feel like you're getting to know them.
You look back at the original trilogy, and it starts with 3PO, Han, Luke and Leia, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Moff Tarkin and Darth Vader. Outside of that, there's not really that many characters in the original film. Everyone else is a supporting character. And when you get to Empire, it's even less, really. It's Han, Luke and Leia, R2-3PO, Luke, Yoda, Lando and Vader. And outside of that, everyone else is a supporting character. The OT is way more tightly focused. Prequel trilogy, there's loads, but I think by then we were so hungry for Star Wars. The fandom's attitude was bring it on, and I want an action figure of everyone. Now, I think you say about Acolyte, I mean, one thing that might have saved the Acolyte was when they hit the green button on making the Acolyte was to say, we're greenlighting 2 seasons of this. Because if they'd have done that, instead of going, let's suck it and see, we throw it into the fish tank full of sharks who just want Star Wars to fail. And now we can watch Star Wars. We comment on Star Wars every week on this show. We comment on Star Wars all the time on Fantha Tracks. Brian and Paul talk about it on Good Morning Tatooine, and there's other pods that we've got and other places we talk about. And we will look at this and say, like you just said, I wonder how confident they were, Lucasfilm, before this even came out. And yet the next thing that came out was Skeleton Crew. Now, they pushed the Acolyte like crazy, and they barely pushed Skeleton Crew. And yet I think a lot of people look at Skeleton Crew and think, what a lovely, charming, enjoyable, well-made, fun show. Please give us more of that. And it didn't feel like maybe Lucasfilm were that confident because they barely talked about it until 6 weeks before the thing landed. And yet we got a show that we talk about all the time and people really enjoyed. And yet the Acolyte was so big and so, such a, that new era, as we talked about earlier, the whole Republic is a comparable thing, and such a big concept that, as you say, they world built really well. I wish we'd seen more of the Jedi Temple. I do wish we'd seen Yoda as a sort of a peripheral character. With it always being Vinestra, and, we see a couple of the other Jedi Council characters much more peripheral. They felt like the 2 or 3 levels down from where the real action was. I wish we'd have seen that. But if they had a greenlit a second season, then like at the end of Willow, when they tease the next big battle and you get that fantastic final shot of all the creatures kicking off and the war, it's like, I want to see that. And we never got to it. Yeah. It's like they didn't have enough confidence in the concept to go, right, Leslie Headland, you've got 2 seasons.
Tell your story.
Yeah, you've got 16 episodes. So knock it out the freaking park, will you? Leave people gasping for more at the end of season 1 instead of what they kind of feels like they did. And they were like, oh, this ain't going quite how we hoped it was going to go. So let's throw Yoda in there, Yeah.
I think you've hit on something. I don't know if Leslie Headland was kind of in her mind thinking, oh, this could run for 4 or 5 seasons. Yeah. But we just got to get past the first one. But I think just generally, if you know you've got a limited time, i.e. we've got to get this all done in 1 season or in 2 seasons, then you pace it out. You break the story to fit. And sure, you might be able to fit in a little bit of filler, or if you need a bottle episode or something, you can kind of do that. But I mean, chalk and cheese, look at Andor. They knew what they wanted to do. They broke it all down and they knew where they needed to get to, which again is another important thing. So again, that I think it goes to show you kind of need to know where you're headed, really. Like Skeleton Crew, you don't need to make some grand sweeping, dramatic paradigm shifting change in the galaxy for it to be enjoyable. And unfortunately, obviously, with what's her face going over to Buffy, probably means that she won't be back to do a season 2, if there is a season 2, anytime soon.
Hi, this is George Mann, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks.
Next question from our lovely friend Mandalorian Lilly. There was promise of some great characters in the Acolyte, only to have them killed off or underused throughout. Was that a great strategic use of characters and storylines, knowing there'd only be 1 season, or a rushed catalogue of errors and missed opportunities? So we have just talked at length about the Acolyte, and this very much butts into the back of that. So what do you think? There are some great characters in the Acolyte.
There are some great characters. By the end of it, I was like, I actually quite like Soul. I really liked that failed Jedi. That just screams prequel trilogy, like in one character. That was a thing, you got rid of Carrie-Anne Moss's character in the opening thing, which is like, that's a disappointment. When you slay all those other characters in 1 episode, it's a bold thing to do. I mean, and you can do it when you're Game of Thrones and you've got a cast of literally hundreds in different families. But when it's meant to be like a core group of Jedi, then it doesn't matter. You do a flashback and it just doesn't really work. I mean, Daphne Keene's character, she annoyed the hell out of me until she started fighting. Again, I think it comes down to writing and stuff, because maybe there's too many characters. I don't really feel like we kind of got to know them. If you imagine, like, after season 1 of The Next Generation, they just kill off half the bridge crew. Like, if you imagine if they killed off, like, Worf and, like, Deanna Troi and Data, as well as Tasha Yar, you'll be like, well, that's a bit of a waste. And also, I don't really care so much because I haven't really got to know those characters.
I just wonder whether if they had have got to a season 2, I don't think it would have been like a direct sequel in that, like, The Last Jedi and The Force Awakens overlap. So they're literally essentially one film. I think that you would have moved 5 or 10 years down the line. They'd established it Venestra Rowe was long-lived.
Yes.
She was 100 and whatever she was by the point of the Acolyte season 1. And she's pretty much the last man standing, if you like, out of all the characters. It's like her and Basil. And who else survives? Camille. So she's got to go. Sol's dead. So she's got to go and, she's pinned the blame on Sol. So she's got to go and try and rectify her massive mistake. Sol's mistake was Osha and May. Her mistake was Camille. So will we ever find out whether she rectified that and how that goes? Because you do have the lineage of Camille, Plagueis, all the way through to Palpatine. So there's a massive story to tell. So I think she being Leslie Headland, would have stepped it forward 10 years every season because you've got a character that's long-lived.
Yeah. But maybe that's also the misdirect. You're too focused on the Jedi and you're missing what the Sith are doing.
The show's called The Acolyte.
Exactly. And we're too busy kind of going, oh, who's the Acolyte? Who's that going to be? But actually, it's really plain and obvious. And second season would have all made a bit more sense.
So Lily's question about whether or not was it a strategic use of characters and storylines or a rush catalogue of areas and missed opportunities, I think it kind of sits somewhere between the two because now it sits as a one-off thing.
You can only make a judgment based on what you see.
Literally that. So I kind of hope that, going back to the question about animation, that if they did more animation, one of the projects that they would do would be to go, okay, let's bring Leslie Headland back in if she wants to do it, and let's get that cast in if they want to do it, and do season 2 of The Acolyte and make it an animated show, and maybe not call it The Acolyte because the perception will be, oh, that's a demotion from live action to animation. Whereas within the realms of Star Wars, that's not a demotion. It's just another way of telling the story. So maybe you come up with a different title, but you pick up 10 years later where Venestra is, because we know it's a bit of a flashbacky kind of world that you flash back to the end of The Acolyte and you see what she did next, what happens with Camille, what happens with Plagueis, and move it forward every season, move it forward 10 years. Not that long until you start getting to the realms of, well, who's this young dude from Naboo? She's Palpatine. What's his deal? And you start bringing it in that way.
It's Plagueis. And if Palpatine learned from Plagueis, then at some point or another, he's got to clear the deck of any other apprentices or potential apprentices. So then you would end up with a showdown between Palpatine versus Camille. That's kind of maybe how you salvage. I don't want to say salvage The Acolyte into a second season or beyond, be it in animation or not, is that actually maybe you focus more on the Sith, more on Manny Jacinto's character. He's had a lot of positive reaction and his character as well. If you're going to sift through the rubble and try and find a diamond in the rough, maybe that's what you do.
Very easy, just a final point on that question, that you could step forward with elements of that show because we know that Dooku leaves the Jedi, one of the lost 20. So who's to say that Venestra wasn't a similar situation? We know Camille turned from being a Padawan into being a Sith, learning the teachings of Plagueis. But there's so much there. And actually, when you try and discern it down and whittle it down, you can kind of sit down and think, I totally see why Leslie Headland wanted to tell this story, because there is from Acolyte season 1 to Phantom Menace, or leading up to Phantom Menace, even like Living Force and stuff like that, there's definitely a pathway with characters already on the table that you could tell those stories. So yeah, unless something tremendous changes, unless a sudden magical pot of money arrives and money's no object and the world's a bit different, I don't see a live action Acolyte season 2. I could certainly see them wanting to do more, maybe in the realms of animation.
Thank you very much for sending all those listeners' questions in to us. You're all now honorary Fantha trackers. Aren't you lucky? I do appreciate everyone who has sent in a question. We can't do these rambly, speculative episodes very often unless we have listeners' questions. So we need more. So if you have heard a question, or more importantly, if you heard an answer that you totally disagree with and want to write in either a thought, a theory, comment, or a question, Mr. Newbold can tell you how you can do it.
I shall. And first things first, I want to thank the people that sent us questions in. Mike Jarvis, Richard Hutchinson, Jamie Richards, Mark Rolfe, Mark Spriggs, John1 and Mandalorian Lilly. Thank you guys for those questions. And yes, indeed, here is how you can send in your listener's question to bulge our sacks once more.
Email radio@fanthatracks.com. Head to links.fanthatracks.com for links to our social media feeds. Fantha Tracks TV and Fantha Tracks Radio. Thanks to James Semple for the Fantha Tracks intro, Blues Harvest for our Making Tracks opening music, and Mark Daniel and Vanessa Marshall for our voiceovers. New episodes drop Tuesdays and Fridays at 7 o'clock UK time. Our weekly news show Good Morning Tatooine goes live Sundays at 9 o'clock UK time on Facebook and YouTube. And remember, Fantha Tracks is absolutely free, so it costs nothing to stay updated on all the latest Star Wars news.
And that's me done for this episode, Mark.
Brilliant. Right, okay, I'm going to go and have a lie down. Maybe stick on the acolyte. Because
Getting old.
Well, because I can't remember that Soul died at the end. So, clearly, I probably need to rewatch it. And on that bombshell, thank you very much for listening, and stay tuned for more of Fantha Tracks when it drops later this week. So until next time, stay safe, take care, and as always, may the Force be with you.
Coming up next on Fantha Tracks Radio, it's another episode of Making Tracks.